unconditional love towards all humans is the transcendent love. You love the formless, you recognize the formless as yourself in the other.
Hi. First of all, greetings from your fans in Poland. I promised them to tell that.
Oh, from Holland?
We all have the very heavy pain bodies there, so you're... as you probably know. So your teaching is quite a salvation. And my question is, again, the same topic, like a one-track mind. Actually, that question about sex triggered the question in my mind because I've just listened several times to the autobiography of a yogi, of Paramahansa Yogananda. Amazing book, and those spiritual masters, they explain very clearly and logically all kinds of things, including the symbolism of the Old Testament. And according to them, that snake is the nerve running through the spinal cord and activates the sex nerve. And the forbidden fruit was sex, because it was predictable that if humans tried that, it would cause the fall of the humankind from pretty much a god on earth with powerful mind to the level of animal. So my question is, do you think that sexual life actually is an obstacle in spiritual unfoldment if someone wants to attain a high level?
Oh, thank you. In many cases, it is an obstacle to the awakening consciousness, but in essence, it is not. It doesn't have to be an obstacle. It can be transcended, which means you don't eliminate it, but there's a much vaster whole into which it loses its importance. Mm-hmm. So you transcend it rather than eliminate it. The elimination of it, I would not recommend, except for very rare individuals for whom that is right. Mm-hmm. So it's transcendence rather than elimination. But to me, the beginning of the fall, I would interpret somewhat differently from the Bible as the beginning of the identification with the mind, the human mind, the knowledge, the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the differentiation of conceptual thinking coming in. But that's one can interpret it in many ways. Mm-hmm. For most humans, I would say, do not attempt, except unless you are one of the exceptions, do not attempt to suppress or eliminate sexuality, but bring awareness to it, yes. And then it's no longer addictive. Mm-hmm. And then it may fall away. For some people, it then falls away by itself, but you don't need to make an effort. That's what
made me feel bad. That because, there is that union between a man and a woman, and there's a lot of beauty in that. So actually, I was sort of turned off by that information in the autobiography of a yogi.
Well, he came from an ancient Indian ascetic tradition, and there's a place for everything. So for Westerners especially, but probably even for Easterners, it's really awareness rather than elimination of something that is so powerfully built into the human organism, and use it for awakening rather than for letting it draw you into unconsciousness.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
My question is on sexuality, and I would say instinctive impulse when I see, for example, a woman jogging, to look. Most times when I look, And also, when the lady is beautiful inside also, how do I balance not getting too lost in the little play, you know? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you. I know what you mean. You may have heard of something called Tantra. It's that means basically bringing consciousness into something that is usually unconscious. For example, sexuality. I would even include other things like eating, things that tend to pull you into unconsciousness. I don't know if you've observed some people who, the moment they start eating, they become quite unconscious, relatively speaking, and then when they stop eating, there's a bit more consciousness again. They go, and then they wake up. So eating consciously would be bringing some awareness into that. Tantra is traditionally used to point to the possibility of bringing consciousness into sex, and sex starts the moment you're looking at a woman jogging. And basically what Tantra means is not to make it into a means to an end, not to look to the next moment and the one after that, the final moment of man-woman union always being orgasm. But sex starts with looking, and to be at every moment honor the moment and enjoy the moment for what it is, which is, there's nothing wrong when your body, mind, organism gets drawn to that. You know that this is happening. If you don't know that this is happening, you become the reaction, and then you are lost. But if you know that this is happening, you can actually allow yourself to be drawn. You can look and enjoy just looking. There's no need to go beyond that. Can you be... I enjoy looking at all kinds of humans, including women or men, it doesn't really matter. I enjoy the human form. I like to be, sometimes sit in a cafe in a corner and simply watch the human beings come in, leave. Some are old, some are young, some are beautiful, some are not so beautiful. They're all beautiful inside, but on the external, the variety of the human form is just quite wonderful to watch. And if you don't want anything, that's the question is whether the attraction turns into wanting. The attraction is, the attention moves there, and it's unconscious. And then the moment comes when you realize that the attention has moved there. There's no need for you, as some spirit traditions might tell you, you must not look at a woman. If the moment you notice your attention moving, look somewhere else. By denying it, you really intensify ultimately the unconscious urge to look. There's even in Buddhist monasteries the monk, when I first visited a monastery, I could see a woman was trying to give a monk something, a pencil or something, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't take it from you. You have to put it on the table, and then I'll take it. I'm not allowed to take something from a woman." And this is how, because the power of sexuality was so strong that for a long time in the past people were afraid of it, because you can't control yourself. If you even just take something, there might be a flash of energy coming. Who knows what will happen next? If you just take a pencil from a woman, what's going to happen next? So to enjoy, you can also, if you, for Tantra, you can enjoy touching someone. There's no need to, it's all really connected with the self-sufficiency of the present moment, and not always wanting the end result, and that includes any kind of sexual attraction. If you bring in present moment living into normal life, you can also practice it there, where you simply enjoy whatever phenomenon is arising at this moment for what it is, instead of it becoming some kind of wanting something in the future, wanting more. Observe the impulse, and if you get lost in it, then you have to wait until you wake up, and then can observe yourself running after her. I remember I had a friend in England many, many years ago who suddenly became very interested in spirituality and asked very deep questions. And a couple of times we were sitting somewhere outside in a park or cafe, and I was talking to him. That was my early form of teaching, individuals coming and asking questions. And I observed a couple of times he was listening to me. It was so important to him, just this vital question was being answered. And suddenly I could see him, he was looking somewhere else behind me. And I thought, what's going on? He stopped listening. And then I looked around, and there was a woman sitting there behind. And spirituality was so important for him. But then something else came up that was even more powerful at that time, and that was the attraction. And then I pointed it out, and he was like a man waking up from sleep or from a dream. He said, "Oh," it was completely lost. And then it happened again. And after that, he was able to be aware of that pull. If you're aware of that pull, you are not the pull. You are not in the grip of that pull. It's nature. The pull is part of the physical nature. But then you are not aware. If you are not aware, you become the pull. And it dominates the next thing that you do. You may run after, or you may try to approach her, or you may lose yourself in fantasizing for the next 30 minutes. All kinds of things happen. If you become the pull becomes action, or it becomes thought. So, are you the pull that you can sense, or are you the knower, the one that knows that this is happening? And if you can be the knower, you can allow yourself, or your body, your physical organism, to experience whatever is happening at this moment without losing yourself in that. It's a spiritual practice. So I recommend that you go into a place where you're likely to encounter many beautiful women. I don't know where that would be, the beach or and practice, sit there and let your attention be pulled. Wonderful practice. And the women can do it with men, or with other women, or men with men, doesn't matter. The important thing is can you be the awareness of what's happening, or are you losing yourself in the pull? So as a practice, just be there, space for the impulse, space for the attraction, without believing that you need to change something. If you suppress it, I don't think it's the most skillful thing to do, to actually say, I must not look, because it's something will build up inside you. It will make it even more powerful. And it will not become obsessive. The awareness will deepen as you practice that. And then you have a choice. There is always a choice. It doesn't mean you cannot act. You can act from the awareness. You can still, if you want to meet someone, you can still approach her and say, I don't know what, nothing comes to mind. That's why I've never done it. It has arisen in the past, and the question, what can I say? Don't know. But you may be better at it. So, if, let's say, we all love each other unconditionally, how can I decide who is to be my partner? Is this based on physical attraction? Isn't this a contradiction with this higher state of consciousness? Okay, so if you love everybody unconditionally, how can you possibly decide who is going to be your partner? That's the question. Because it seems then there's no preference anymore. Or if it's physical attraction, isn't there a contradiction? If you're in a higher state of consciousness, then shouldn't or not be physically attracted to anybody? Is that the implication, the question? Well, the love we're talking about, the unconditional love towards human beings and life forms, is a see what is it that you love in the other when you love unconditionally? You don't love their physical form, you don't love their psychological form, their personality. The unconditional love goes deeper. It's a transcendent love, that what you love is not the form, but the formless essence of the other. And you can only love that when you can sense within yourself that dimension, the formless, when you can be still and present enough and then look at another human being. And then you can recognize something. What you recognize is, for lack of a better word, the consciousness, which is the essence of the other human, as it is the essence of who you are. Consciousness prior to the consciousness being born into some kind of form, personality, which is there, and the physical form, which is there. But in every being, there is still the dimension of consciousness that is prior to form. Although the human being has become form, consciousness has assumed form, has incarnated, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that the formless and timeless consciousness is lost. It's still there as the essence. And when you can sense it in yourself, you can sense it because you're still and present enough. From that dimension in yourself, you can sense it in the other, and that is love. It's basically a recognition that in essence the other is the same as you. But then, of course, there's always, that is the transcendent dimension to every human being. In addition to that transcendent dimension, there is a form identity of every human being. Every human being has a physical form and an emotional form and a mental form. That's the inner, that's the personality. So the physical appearance and the personality consisting of mental, emotional conditioning and so on. So there are the two levels. The unconditional love towards all humans is the transcendent love. You love the formless, you recognize the formless as yourself in the other. But then you are still here as a form too, and the form may respond to another form. The physical, there can be physical attraction. It is not incompatible with the transcendent realization, although some ancient or not so ancient traditions may tell you that. It is not incompatible. You can have physical attraction on the level of form. You can also have an attraction towards the mental, emotional form of that other human being because it resonates with something in your own form. So that means you may be drawn to another human being physically or mentally, emotionally, because you resonate with that. And then perhaps you enter into a relationship. So different levels operate. The transcendent remains. It can become obscured through excessive attachment, of course, to the mental or emotional dimension in the other. So in a relationship, the realization of essence identity, as I sometimes call it, can become obscured when form identity takes over completely, which could happen through the pain body, which could happen through emotional, getting identified with arising emotions and losing touch with the transcendent. Yes, that can happen, but it's not incompatible. Everybody's challenge is to balance the two in their lives, in their relationships, to relate to the other on the transcendent level, and at the same time, if it's there, on an emotional, mental, physical level. Without the transcendent dimension in a relationship, it's not ultimately satisfying and it cannot really truly work for long if the transcendent is missing completely in a relationship. It's physical attraction and attraction between personalities is not enough to keep it going. It can be going for a while, but then it becomes frustrating and you see more and more of the limitations of the other person. And the other person sees more and more of your limitations, which are always there. And when you live together, it becomes very obvious that the other person has his or her limitations. Now, as long as the realization of the transcendent dimension is there, that's fine. Those limitations can exist within the space of the transcendent, and they're not destructive of the relationship. Now, you may find it's sometimes easier to have this unconditional love towards people that you don't know so well than towards people with whom you share a lot of past. Because they're the past, the form identity of that person can be very powerfully there in your mind, in your interaction. So that's the challenge of being present with family members, parents, grown-up children, and so on. And of course, as you know, Ram Dass recommends, if you think you're enlightened, as a test, he recommends that you spend 2 weeks with your parents, and that will tell you whether you're really enlightened or not. Go and spend 2 weeks, stay with your parents for 2 weeks. In most cases, that is a good test, unless your parents are enlightened, in which case there's not much point in using it. It doesn't tell you anything. That
if one is in the surrendered state of consciousness, can they... I've heard teachings from my own experience and from just reading. With romantic love, there can be, I need you, behavioral expectations. And then there's like the selfless kind of love, where there are no behavioral expectations, and you still love the person. My question is, if you're in the surrendered state of consciousness, if you're completely surrendered to what is, do you still have that kind of selfless love for a specific person romantically? Or does that kind of dissolve? Or is it just only the universal, which is wonderful, the universal love? It's amazing. It's wow, you know? But can you also have that specific kind of love for someone?
Thank you. So the question, you're basically asking, would you then love everybody equally, so there would not be one person singled out as special, as the Course in Miracles calls it, special relationship, which the Course in Miracles says, of course, it's of the ego, to single one out as special. Now, if you single one out as special and what you see in the other is the form only, and you're attached to the form, which doesn't just mean the physical form. Of course, that's an important part of it, because that is part of the sexuality and all that, which is part of the attraction. But it also includes the psychological form of the other, who you think that person is, their psychological makeup, how they behave and speak and act. That is also form, that's the psychological form. And there can be strong attachment to those aspects. Both the physical come together with the psychological, which includes also emotions. There's an emotional link also there. And those when they all come together, you fall in love. And aptly, it's called fall because it's a fall in consciousness. But that's okay. If that's what you experience, then that life wants you to experience that. It's part of your learning, that fall in consciousness. Now, it's not immediately, of course, experienced as a fall. It's experienced as a high. And only afterwards do you realize, oh, that was a fall. And afterwards can be after a year. It can be after 3 months. It can be after the honeymoon. It can be soon after you move in together. And then the suffering starts. What before was the love now becomes the suffering. And then for a while it can happen that you fluctuate for the next year or 2 or 3 between still feeling the love and the suffering, and then usually it comes to an end after a while, or you compromise and for some other reason stay together. So that's now if you are able to feel in the other, well, first of all in yourself, that which is beyond form, the essence, the stillness, the presence, whatever we want to call it. And by sensing it in yourself and being it, then you recognize it in another. And that recognition that in the space of stillness is true love, which doesn't need the other, because the other only reflects to you who you are. But even there it can happen that the form of the other, because you are not just the formless, temporarily you are also the form. Temporarily you are either a man or a woman. Temporarily you have this body. And this form, this man or this woman, and this body and the emotional field may find a certain resonance with, on different levels, be it sexual, emotional, psychological levels, a certain resonance with the other form. And that resonance, that is what in the unenlightened romantic love makes up the entire relationship. But now, when you know who you are in your essence, all those factors are still there, but they do not make up the entire relationship. Beyond the resonance between the sexual or emotional or physical resonance, there's a deeper level present. So you can go through the motions of romantic love with the transcendent level also present in yourself and recognizing it in the other. So romantic love may, after a while, of course, for the relationship to be truly deep in any relationship, some transcendent element has to be there, because it's not going to last otherwise. It doesn't mean necessarily that people need to be totally awake already, totally awake, knowing who they are, but some element of the formless must be there eventually in the relationship for the relationship to survive and be a true relationship. Otherwise, all you have left in the relationship is your judgments about the other and physical attraction and just mind, emotional. And that's ultimately is not enough. It's not enough. The added element, the transcendent element, needs to be there. And if the transcendent is there, you can be quite content even without the romantic relationship. You no longer say, I need that. It's when it's there, it's beautiful, but you don't need that. Yeah, pull. So the mind, it is often in relationships, the mind prevents the deeper level, the transcendent level, from arising in the relationship. So the mind destroys the relationship. Identification with the story in the mind, which is about yourself, and the other obscures love. It might even say love. Well, there's no such thing as love. I read in a novel last year by a British writer. It is McEwan. He's a well-known contemporary writer, Ian McEwan, and he wrote this book about. It's called On Cecil Beach. It's about two young people falling in love in England in the 50s. And these two young people, they feel the pull towards each other, and they begin to fall in love. But sexually, they are completely repressed and very fearful about. It's in the 50s, so the sixth revolution hasn't happened yet about sex. So they're both extremely fearful about sex. And then they get married, and their first night they stay in a bed and breakfast on near Cecil Beach in the south of England, and they're trying to have sex for the first time, and it's a disaster. Dreadful disaster. And she is so shocked, she runs out of the room to the beach. Oh, they don't realize it's actually quite funny. I don't explain what disaster, you can probably imagine it. So she runs out, and the next day, so they don't see each other that night. That's their honeymoon, their wedding night. And the next day, he goes to the beach, Cecil Beach, and she sees she's walking on the beach. They start talking to each other. And both feel still, the pull is still there. But both their minds are bringing up stories why it's not possible, it's dreadful. They are projecting things onto the other, what she's. And so the pull is there, but they both create stories in their minds that cuts them off from the other. And they separate. And then they spend the rest of their lives doing other things. And the rest of their lives in the novel is compressed to 5 or 6 pages. And that shows how destructive the mind can be of true relationship. How the mind imposes interpretations on the other that are total fictions. But there's so much, as Don Miguel Ruiz would say, there's so much faith in these fictions that it's an impossibility for the human being to see what the mind is creating is a fictitious judgment on that creates a barrier between yourself and the other. This writer is not spiritual at all. He just observed human nature and he presented it, and that is the ultimate lesson is spiritual.
Thank you very much.